When I found out that Rob had been sentenced to 60 years, I almost fainted. And pregnant with twins, I turned hot all over. I'm on the prison rec yard myself. He's talking to me through a barbed wire window that he's tied mattresses up together to stand on top of in another cellmate's room, so that he could talk to me while the women that are incarcerated are outside on the rec yard. And so in that moment, is when God really showed up through me, and my words to him in response to that, instead of fainting, which I clearly felt, my words to him immediately were, "It will make the movie more better, but I promise I won't let go of your hand. We'll walk it together."
What happens when your worst fear becomes your reality? Hi, I'm Brent Cassity. Welcome to the Nightmare Success In and Out podcast, where we explore how to overcome your fears and nightmares and set yourself free. We're going to be exploring this topic with guys that was in Leavenworth with and others who survived their own nightmare. These stories can be inspiring, sometimes sad. There's some humor, but hopefully you can come away with a nugget of something that'll help you knock down some of the prisons you built up in your own mind. All right, welcome back. Nightmare Success and Out. Listeners, this is where you come for what happens when your worst fear becomes your reality. How do you adapt, survive, overcome, set yourself free? Folks, I know I sound like a broken record, but don't forget to subscribe, follow this thing out, like it up, comment. It helps the show, and I really appreciate it. So who are we talking to today on Nightmare Success? I've got to tell you, we're talking to Fox and Rob Richardson, and I just watched their documentary last night with my wife, Julie, and I got to tell you, it was so powerful. If you've got time, and that's the name of the documentary, Time, you can get it on Amazon, and they've got another one that's Time 2. That's I'm not sure exactly. I'll ask them where you get that, but this was just, oh man, I don't know how to explain it except it just pulls you in and you ride the journey with them, and it's quite the journey and how they got through it and survived is just so inspiring, really. So, I say this all the time, what happens when your worst fear becomes your reality? Well, what happens when your worst fear becomes your reality and it lasts for months, and then it's for years, and then it's for decades? Well, today's episode is about love under pressure, about a family stretched across prison walls, about resilience that refuses to break. My guests today are Sibil Fox Richardson, known to many as Fox, and her husband, Robert Richardson, known as Rob. They are a New Orleans-based couple who endured 21 years as an incarcerated family, 21 years of raising 6 sons while navigating a system designed to separate, silence, and fracture families. Their story is captured in the award-winning documentary Time, a film that moved the world, but for them, it wasn't a movie, it was their life. Through it all, Fox and Rob chose faith over fear, purpose over bitterness, and love over despair. Today, they lead advocacy efforts through the New Orleans chapter of the Participatory Defense Movement, an initiative of Rich Family Ministries, the organization they founded with a bold mission, changing lives and laws through love. I want to recognize our show sponsor, Auto Plaza Direct. Who likes spending a couple of weekends walking car lots looking for a car? Then you spend 4 or 5 hours in the dealership to buy a car. It's kind of like a root canal appointment. Well, there's a better way to take away all that hassle of getting a car. It's called Auto Plaza Direct. They're your personal car concierge. Just tell them the car you want, what you can pay, and they'll go find that car for you. They'll negotiate your best price. They also offer you warranties and financing. It's all full service. Go to autoplazadirect.com to get started with your personal car concierge. It's the new hassle-free way, the car buying experience you deserve. Auto Plaza Direct. Tell them Brent from Nightmare Success sent you. Folks, I want to share with you a powerful and moving new book you won't want to miss. My Name is Saffron. Voices, silenced, stifled, and taken away by author Saffron Gustafson. This isn't just a story. It's a journey through resilience, survival, and reclaiming your voice after being silenced for far too long. Saffron's story takes you inside the hidden struggles, the pain, and ultimately the triumph of refusing to be defined by circumstances. As Saffron was putting the finishing touches on her book, the prison she had just been released from, Federal Dublin FCI, was permanently closed because of sexual abuse of the women prisoners. If you've ever wondered what it takes to rise from the darkness of places, to find your truth, and to speak it boldly, this book will inspire you. Pick up your copy of My Name is Saffron today, available now on Amazon or wherever books are sold. Trust me, you'll be moved, challenged, and changed by her story. Wow. Wow. I can't wait to jump into this one, guys. Fox and Rob, how are you guys?
Right, it'd be wonderful since we're now here with you.
That's right. Thank you for having us on the show.
Well, I've got to tell you, and thank you for pulling over. You guys are on the road. You just told me you've been all around the southern parts of the world, the United States, and you've pulled over on the side of the road nice enough to do this podcast. So I appreciate that. So,
Listen, telling
guys,
these
I got to
stories
tell
are
you.
so important.
Well, I know it is, and I the the documentary talks about how you guys were high school. You had the high school romance, and you were young kids. Can can you tell me a little bit about that childhood growing up, Fox? What, because I know your mom was a big influence. What all was going on in your world as a little kid?
Man, let me tell you, at 16 years old, this young fella comes knocking on my door to connect with a girlfriend of mine. We had called him because we needed a ride to our second school. We took what I like to refer to as a mental health day, the morning. You can read between the lines, and but so in our health day break, our mental health break, she called this gentleman to come and take us to the school, and when I opened the door, I was like, okay, Wanda, that was my girlfriend. I thought, she went on and on about this rascal. And so when I finally laid eyes on him, I was like, okay, you telling the truth or whatever, edging my girlfriend on. And later on that night, somebody calls me. And I'm like, wait a minute, hold up. How'd you get my number? I thought you were Wanda's guy.
You're supposed to be Wanda's guy. So,
Right.
Rob, I couldn't tell. I couldn't tell in the documentary. Did Fox's mom like you or not?
I think Fox's mom was much like Fox. So they both at the onset of it would not ever admit that they liked me as much as they did. I knew that they both loved me from the onset of it all. It was just gonna take some coaxing on my part to convince them to go ahead and own what I think was truly happening on the. Yeah, I think that is typically the thoughts or the positioning that usually happens when it comes
Uh-huh.
to in-laws. Is
For
that
sure.
usually the husbands don't typically get along with the mother or the father on the other side and vice versa. So yeah, our story began much in the same way, Brett.
So did you come from big families as
Hmm.
yeah, like Rob, how many siblings did you have?
I am a mix of eight. So there was eight
Wow.
of us all together. I am the youngest of eight, and Fox came from a family about half that size.
4. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Four. And
And then we
was
have
it
6 sons together.
okay? And I know you have six sons together, and that's one of the many things I want to talk to you guys about. So you guys meet up, and this romance starts. What's the next thing that happens?
Well, it goes on for about 10 years, on again, off again, on again, off again. But, throughout that whole 10-year time frame, Fox and I stayed married. I'm not married, but we stayed connected to one another. We were always friends. And I think that is probably the thing that we were first and foremost, is that we had found a friendship to one another because when we met, what Fox did not mention is that as she was 16 at the point that we met. But I was home visiting from leave from the military, and my first assignment sent me overseas. And so the first 2 years that Fox and I were together were spent with me living abroad in Holy Loch, Scotland. So much of our communication happened, via letter. There were no emails back then. There were no text messaging, nothing of the sort. Long distance phone calls were just that, long distance phone calls, and they came with long distance phone call pricing. And so, I'm giving you just all of those pieces just for, the audience to see, how much effort had to be employed in order to, stay in communication with one another. So Fox and I basically began our relationship as far as communication was concerned over a telephone and by paper, pen and paper. And we would spend years writing to each other, just through pen and pad and, occasional phone calls. And therein kind of began our relationship, but it required us to learn and know so much about one another because of our communication, the way that we were forced to communicate.
That's interesting. I didn't know that part of the story because that's some foreshadowing of how you guys had to figure out how to communicate over a 21-year sentence, or actually you were sentenced to 60 what was it, 61 years, but
61
21.
years, right?
Yeah. But the, so you get back, Rob, from being overseas. Is it like an immediate thing that you and Fox think, okay, it's time, it's get to go time. We're going to get married.
No, by the time I came home from overseas, I think we had about another 5 years of this on again, off again thing.
Okay.
Yeah, when I finally came back home, this was during a period of time that we were off again. And so when I say off again, meaning that we didn't set claim to one another. We were just friends. And so no matter if I was dating someone else or Fox was dating someone else, it never cut off our communication to each other. We continued making phone calls. It wouldn't be until 1997 that Fox and I would ultimately decide, that we wanted to do more than just date on again, off again. It was just during one of those periods in our life, and I think I had been moved by an event that I attended in 1995. I went to the Million Man March, and one of the requests or suggestions given during the march was that young men would go back home and that they would start businesses so that they could hire people in their communities. That they would, if they had children out of wedlock, that they would go back and marry the women of those who had given children to them. And Fox was, for all practical purposes, she was my baby mama, and but that being said, I thought that she deserved to be something more than just the mother of my kids, but that they deserved the right to be, brought up in a structured setting. And with that being said, Fox and I thought that marriage would be the ideal thing for us. So at least I did in the moment. I proposed, and then she denied me, and then I think she says, "Well, just give me a little time to think about it." And she maybe took off about 5 minutes, and she came back, and she was like, "Yes, yes, yes, I'll marry you. I'll marry you. Yes, I'll marry you."
That's good. So,
Undertone, it took you long enough.
so Fox, it seemed like to me, Fox, that and there's a little bit of this in the documentary, that you had an entrepreneurial flair all your own. Shows you talking to the people on the phone about the cars and doing the commercials about getting the cars. And what were you doing in that time period? That time before you were married, were you jumping into the business world, or how did your world form in those early years?
I was working on I had gotten my BS degree in biology. I was thinking about medical school, but by that time I actually had given birth to our first son together. And so that made my career choices a little stagnant, if you would. And so then I went on to get my master's in public administration. And after completing my master's in public administration, I moved back home to Shreveport and started teaching as an adjunct professor at the university while working on my doctorate degree. And so, just knowing that the higher level of education would, give me an opportunity to be a higher earner in our society. And so that while I was working on my personal life and getting the foundation for it established for our family, that I could at least be progressing in my career. And then about that time was when Rob had said, we both just came to a fork in the road where we knew that getting married was really bigger than us, that, the community was counting on this, our children was counting on this, the success of them was counting on this. And so it was without hesitation that I understood that sometimes marriage even is not just about how much you love somebody or how in love you are. When Rob and I married, I actually was not in love with him. We weren't even dating. He was just every time I turned around, all of a sudden he was right there. And I'm like, where are you
There he
going?
is.
You're just like hanging out, like we weren't even dating. And within 30 days of that, he asked me to marry him. And in 30 days of that, we actually married. And so I think, again, it was just about the importance of the institution of marriage that made it so easy for me to say yes. Not only do I know I've always loved you, but this is the best next right thing for us to do for ourselves, for our children, and our community.
I like that. So you guys you get married, and how much longer is it after that that you decide to become business owners, entrepreneurs of the first hip hop apparel store? Is that happen soon, or do you? You jump right into that, or is it
Oh, it was
happen?
absolute it was always a
Mhm.
theme. It was always one of the things that attracted Rob and I to one another because we were always dreaming of having your own, building your own. My father was an entrepreneur, and so I knew that that was just something that was really important to me. And so to be able to connect with not only my best friend, the father of my children, but to connect with him who was also a dream chaser like me, was just like perfect time. And then I will have to add, we didn't just get married, we eloped. And to
Okay.
consummate that marriage, he bungee jumped the night of our union because of course we had to prove to everybody like nobody thought we would pull it off, you know. And so it's just like yes we did it in spite of, not because we had all of the right answers or did all the next right things, but we still made it to the finish line, if you would. And so that next day we drove back from Kissimmee, St. Cloud, Florida, where we had danced the night away with strangers, and went to Disney World on our the day what for our honeymoon. The next day we went to Disney World, and then drove back home, signed the paperwork for what would become our first home, and then started negotiating the lease on what would be the location for our first business. So the entire road trip of going to get married and coming back was all dreaming about how we were going to come back home and launch our first business together. Not only were we going to marry, we were going to just wrap up all of our dreams all at one time,
Yeah, right.
we thought.
Well, it was, and you can tell in the documentary that you started filming early on. I mean, the beginning, there's of you guys driving in the car. The kids are little bitty, and the two of you are in the front, and you're going to I think a family member's house. But I mean, we're talking about a while back when people didn't have their cell phones to film with, and you start capturing moments on film that later becomes you documenting your life through, this that happens. And so walk us through, guys, this thing that happens with you, because everybody who has started a business, they know that it's tough. It's like a roller coaster ride. And sometimes you have investors, and sometimes you have banks, and sometimes you have people from family money that'll, make an investment. How did you guys get into it?
Feet first, don't.
I was thinking head first.
Oh, yeah, probably that one too.
Just at that, I guess for context, it would be important probably just to add some context in terms of we're talking about like in the 1990s at this point, where when you think about camcorders being, I guess you could say a new advent, at that point, a new discovery, a new find. And very few people even own camcorders back then
Personal use.
for personal use, because I think they were almost $1,000 a bit at all when they first came out. And then it would later go on to be argued that that Fox is in fact the mother of selfies, because most people documented other things, but no one ever thought to like turn the camera on themselves and then become both director and subject of the recording. And so that was, again, like you said, just an early on fascination that Fox has always shown, with this new technology, filmmaking. Therein kind of began that part. Much and on about the same time, just the culture of hip hop had its origin on and around the same time, and fashion shows and
Mhm.
clothing stores and those
Yeah,
kind of things
remember
as
all
well.
that. Yeah.
Those were also new discoveries or things that ventures that people were getting into. And it was one of my own, because I had been living in New Jersey for quite some time, and just seeing a lot of these shops popping up in the East Coast area made me want to open up one in our hometown. And so when Fox and I started, looking at what a business idea or a concept of a business would look like for us, then we started figuring ways that we would be able to combine, my love for the culture of hip hop and her love for the filming and
Filming.
speaking.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that being said, culture kind of became our birth child in terms of how we thought that we would combine our interests.
So how long did it go on when you started this that you were like, "Uh-oh,
We're in
we're in
trouble.
trouble"? Because what I read, I think that there was an investor that was going to invest or backed out, and that put you guys in a jam. How
Like right before our
how
opening,
Okay.
Yeah, it was maybe just
About
after.
6 months
Okay.
after
So
we married that we actually had everything in position. The investor pulled out, and everything else started crumbling down around us, Mr. Cassidy. So it's a matter of I'll tell you a joke. I had a friend, I was sharing with her that we were only married 6 months before we entered the criminal justice system, and a friend of mine says back to me, she says, "Wow, that must have been an amazing 6 months." And I said, it was actually incredible. That's why I would spend the next 21 years trying to get it back.
yeah,
So
yeah,
Things moved so swiftly during those first 6 months of marriage. As Fox may mention, just days within us coming back home from eloping, we had closed on what became our family's first home that we bought. In that same week, we also closed on a 36 square foot building that would become the home of our family's first business. Simultaneously, we were closing on a piece of real estate property that we were using as a rental property, and so we were like, foot on the gas, just
yeah.
really moving at lightning speed. And then I think that there was just some hesitation on parts of when you talk about investors, that it would probably be like trying to sell Bitcoin or trying to sell the internet or trying to sell any of these new tech ways or an electric car, to people that, had no clue about any of these things. And so hip hop clothing stores and all those types of things, they were foreign, to what our would be investors would typically look at, when they consider putting their money up behind something. And so one of our investors, I guess, got a little antsy about the investment that he had committed to. And on and around that time, all of those other things were now in motion and really contingent upon the installment of that investment. And when it didn't happen, us trying to figure out then how do we juggle it all, coupled with the house that we bought that was what we thought was our family's dream home. The foundation had shifted, and
we
it
discovered
we
later
discovered that the foundation had shifted,
when when
and
when it rained through the roof and all of the water and the roof fell in, all of that. It was like, oh wow.
this is like our first rain. We hadn't even been in the house a good maybe 90 days to
Yeah.
120 days at the time that this rain happens, and all of the carpeting and everything that we had just, had put into the house, the
Mm.
furnishings, this stuff was destroyed. Being in our mid 20s, doing all of these things, we didn't have the best of mentors, or people that could even guide us through what we were experiencing in the moment. And left to our own devices, we started entertaining thoughts that would ultimately lead to the action that would change our lives forever.
Well, I think it's fascinating how, and I wanted to ask you guys, like, because up to this point, you guys are just people getting by, doing things that people do, buying houses, buying property, starting a business, going overseas, doing, serving the country. How does it hatch that? Because I know, you say, Fox, desperate people do desperate things. How does the idea hatch that, I mean, you're not bank robbers. I mean, you're not good at this. I mean, you're not sophisticated and well, we've knocked off 7 banks. We might as well knock off another. No, this is like you're just people getting going, and how does it hatch? How does it happen?
I think like many things, people don't just wake up one day and decide that I'm going to commit suicide. You don't wake up one day and decide that I'm going to go murder someone. You don't wake up and decide that, many of these things that happen that we know as crime, they happen through a series of events, that happen. Hardship happens, first and foremost, and then depending on how much hardship that happens, it has a way of dictating what the actions ultimately become. Culture dictates a lot of these things. Media dictates a lot of those things. I think back to just whenever I have these kind of conversations, Brent, I'm always forced to go back in time in order to be present in my sharing, about what took place. And when I think back to those times, I think about like how um bank robbery movies exist during that time. They had Dead Presidents. They had Set It Off. They had Keanu Reeves and them played Point Break, and they were a bunch of guys that dress up like the presidents, and they
Presidents,
surf
right?
by day, and yeah, and they go surfing all over the world. But that was their thing. But all of these movies, were movies that, when you think about programming, we program or we present movies in ways, and a lot of times they fall upon very impressionable minds. In our early to mid 20s, we were still very impressionable at that point, and never in a million years left to our own devices would we have thought to do such a thing. But when you add to desperation, or when you add to hardships and you add music and you add movies and films and all of these things that tend to condone
Glorify it.
such
Yeah.
behavior, and sensationalize it in certain instances, then you have a predisposition toward doing certain things when the right scenario creates itself. And desperation was a ripe situation that created the moment, where we thought that this was the best.
Best alternative. So when the day happened, just because your mind out of curiosity because of somebody that does that event, when you pull up to that, and are you 100% in, or are you thinking, I don't know if we should do this?
I think all three of us were probably 1 foot in, 1 foot out.
Yeah.
When you do anything, basically everyone knows the difference between right and wrong, unless there's some type of mental challenge that's happening that don't allow that to happen for you. But most normal people, all normal people, pretty much know the difference between right and wrong. When you are on your way to go rob a bank, you know that it's wrong the entire way going to the bank. The thing is because of peer pressure and all of those things, no one was bold enough in that moment to say, hey, man, this is some stupid shit we're thinking about. Should we catch the next exit and turn back around and
Right.
go back home and do what normal people do? But in that moment, no. But, God being God, God did what God did in that moment, as he always manages to do. And we had a bus accident on the way to the thing. God had given us a moment right then to say, hey, nutso, you guys think you might want to rethink this, right? You do know that a bus just ran over you. They're wrong. The police report has been written in your favor. Just sue for the damages. You'd have the money that you need in order to open up the shop. But at that point, we saw a wrecked car and said, "Oh man, now the car is wrecked. Throw that on the pile." And so we got to get the car fixed. So we got to do this. And but these are the minds of early to mid 20-year-olds. And so when I look now at my early to mid 20-year-olds, I'm like, wow, okay.
All gets past this day gets past you.
Hmm.
When the nightmare happens, how does it happen? How do you guys end up, do they come and get you? Do you turn yourselves in? Like, what happens from that day forward?
Both of those things happen. There's shots fired. There's foot race. There's illusion, and then there's ultimately capture on one instance, and in another, there's a matter of turning themselves in. But as Fox made mention, I wouldn't want to give away all of the details of
Yeah,
that.
I got it.
If one of your
Okay,
audience
so but
members
the
would
big
want to read it.
question, the big question I have is that, you guys were in this together, but you made separate decisions. One chose to do a plea bargain and one chose to go to trial. How does that happen between a husband and a wife? Like how did you guys come to those decisions?
It wasn't our decision. It was actually the decision of our attorney that thought that it was the best. What a lot of people don't know, and again, that's why we employ reading books. Movies and films have a way of just kind of broad stroking the details of a person's life, and then people walk away thinking that they have the details of it. But how do you condense 21 years of a thing into an 80-minute film? It's impossible. But that being said, what people don't know is that we all pled guilty to the crimes at the onset of them. We had already had a plea bargain that had been worked out where Fox would do no jail time, and that Ontario and our fall partner that was on the charge with us, would not face anything more than 10 to 18 years pending a pre-sentence investigation. And so all of the things that came back from the pre-sentence investigation indicated that there was nothing out of line about Fox not doing jail time or Ontario and I receiving a lighter sentence. But we had a overzealous attorney that entered the picture, and in his efforts to get a quote unquote better deal for us, of course, in exchange for a check, he upset all of that, and then he felt that he needed to upset it all in order to renew or to refresh the conversation. Would be later, many years later, that I would learn that the plea bargain didn't have to be upset in order for you to negotiate further. There were ways that the plea bargain could have been maintained and kept in place in the interest of justice for yourself. And then, other factors could have, been brought in later that may minimize the sentence beyond where they were already looking. That is the part or a part of the story that a lot of people don't know is that we all pled guilty. But in the midst of the attorney who came in and upset the plea bargain, ultimately he pulled out when we were no longer able to pay him. So now we were left now from under of the sanctity that the plea bargain originally offered. So we were out without a lawyer and we were also without plea bargains at that moment. In comes a overzealous prosecutor now at this point, and the overzealous prosecutor at this point pulled all deals off the table and said that he was pushing for trial because that's what special prosecutors do. And that being said, we ultimately went to trial, was sentenced to 61 years. My 61-year sentence came as a result of a 60-year armed robbery sentence that was given to me as a first offender. And then the other two crimes that I was facing, which was 2 counts of jury tampering for having shared information with 2 members of the jury. That information, what people don't know is that we were facing 5 to 99 years for each count of the jury tampering. Because the way that Louisiana law is written is that if you tamper with the jury while the jurors are impaneled, you now face the same amount of time for those tamperings as you would for the crime that the jury is impaneled for. And so therein, we were facing now 297 years. The district attorney in his request for sentence ultimately decided that he would suspend my jury tampering charges down to 5 years, suspend 4 of the years, leave me with 1 year, and that 1 year would run separate from the armed robbery, but it was to remind me the last time that jury tampering happened in the city of Lincoln Parish. And so it was 1938 when the last jury tampering had happened in their city. And 1999 is when I was sentenced. Therein was 61-year difference between 1938 and 1999. And so he figured that that would be a provocative enough of a sentence that I would entertain it for the time that I was serving at Angola. Maybe some other people would learn that 1, not to mess with their parish, and 2, don't commit crime.
So were you,
that is,
and I just ask you because I don't know this, was Fox and you, did that sentencing all happen around the same time?
no, our sentencings happened differently because I was when they decided that they wanted to take us to trial, when they decided that they would take us to trial, they took us to trial separately because she had a different attorney than me and my nephew. And as a result of it, he thought that it was in his best strategy to wait to see what the outcomes would be for myself in Ontario before deciding what the next steps would be for Fox's.
Fox, and I think at this time you're pregnant with twins, and your husband just gets sentenced to 61 years. What goes through someone's mind when that type of situation lands on you?
Well, I think that if you don't have a higher power, you will find one. I think that the system, it does exactly what it's designed to do, and it's not to rehabilitate people or redirect our citizenry or build them up or restore them to grace. It is really to dehumanize, to destroy us. And so when they sentenced Rob, when I found out that Rob had been sentenced to 60 years, I almost fainted. And pregnant with twins, I turned hot all over. I'm on the prison rec yard myself. He's talking to me through a barbed wire window that he's tied mattresses up together to stand on top of in another cellmate's room, so that he could talk to me while the women that are incarcerated are outside on the rec yard. And so in that moment, is when God really showed up through me, and my words to him in response to that, instead of fainting, which, I clearly felt, my words to him immediately were, it will make the movie more better, but I promise I won't let go of your hand. We'll walk it together. But it was that commitment of saying that I won't let go of your hand. We'll walk it together, whatever this is. And that was the truth that I always work to maintain throughout the incarceration, even when our marriage was being challenged, all the things, my commitment to him to never let go of his hand and make sure we are able to restore him and get him back home. Because truthfully, yes, we deserve to be sanctioned. How dare we think about harming other people, even with the scare tactic of trying to take something from an institution that did not belong to us? Our behavior was way out of line. But at the end of the day, no life. There was no loss of life in our offense. So then the state sanctioned violence comes in and takes our lives away from our children for taking $5,000 from a bank, Brett, because that's literally how much we got outside of the bank with that they got back immediately. And I tell a joke in time too. You were saying about the links for those that may want to see the sequel to the Oscar nominated film. It is available through a limited exclusive release at time to twomovie.com. But I tell a joke in time to movie that says that, they gave him 61 years for taking $5,163 and 36 cents. And I could have sworn the 36 cents was ours because I know we had some money before we
Something to
went in
that.
that bank. Right, right, But it is it goes without saying that truthfully, uh, had it not been for our faith, and that has been rooted in our love and our love for God, it just would not have been possible for us to overcome the depths of hell that we walked through for 21 years. Because anybody that knows anything about Angola State Prison, it is a living, breathing hell.
Yeah, no, and I told you guys that before we got on, Lester Holt did a 60 Minutes piece that was Angola, and it's and there's some prisons that you just know the name of, Angola, Leavenworth. There's things there. Some people just know Alcatraz, and Angola is one of those. And let's take a break here because when we get back, I want to talk about the survival and the redemption of how you guys get through all this because it's pretty remarkable. A lot of people don't like how they show up online. Many individuals think there's no hope when it comes to managing your reputation on Google. There is hope. It's called the Discoverability Company that can help you, whether you're building a reputation from scratch or you're repairing search results after a negative news story. Discoverability can also help you how you portray it on popular AI services like ChatGPT. To learn more, visit discoverability.co. It's not .com, it's .co. Listeners of Nightmare Success can get $100 off with coupon code Nightmare Success. And the Nightmare Success podcast is sponsored by the White Collar Support Group, the world's first support group devoted to people navigating the white collar criminal justice system. I'm a member of the White Collar Support Group, and I can tell you this is a bunch of people who help each other through the criminal justice journey for free. Whether you're just starting your journey or you made it through to the other side, this is a great space where you can join us on Zoom Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. For more information, go to prisonist.org. It's prisonist.org. Okay, so all this is set. The nightmares happened. Now the nightmare goes on that Fox, you find out that you're not going to do probation and you're going to have to do time. And it was heart wrenching in the show, in the documentary. For the kids thought that too. And you saying to your son, we just got to hurry up and count the days before I go in. And it was just like that time period too, for parents when you're going in is just such the most awkward time in the world. But when you guys are in prison and you're serving time, when you walk into this space that you didn't plan on being in, Fox, what was your mindset going into that, knowing that this was nowhere that you ever thought you were going to be?
Mm. The immediate thought that came to me was just that when I saw all of the atrocities that actually existed in how they were warehousing other human beings, and I just looked around and my prayer was just that God would let me use my voice for the voiceless. May I use my voice and my life force to speak to what is going on here. I just thought that maybe if people knew more, that's why, Rob and I are so really grateful for your podcast, Nightmare Success, because if people know more, I think we might, as a society, do better. We might treat people, when you break the law, you don't break your humanity. You don't break your citizenship. Your citizenship as a U.S. citizen is not removed. And if that be the case, then we should not want to mistreat any human being, in particular, any U.S. citizen on our own watch using our own taxpayers' dollars. Yes, we want to correct behavior. Yes, we want our people to do what is righteous. But at the same token, the state sanctioned violence that our system implements is another level of that lessens humanity than it should be. And so
And
when you talk about having to serve time in prison, my prayer was that I could use my voice to make a difference and that they gave the right one time out because I was going to use this time. I was going to show them what I would do with the time that they had set me aside away from my children and my family because they knew the tendency for me to reoffend again was slim to none.
And
Here
Fox,
I
you
am.
came out on fire. Fox, you came out on
Yes,
fire. And
yes,
were
I
you
had
thinking
to.
that while you were in? You were thinking, "Hey, when I hit the door here, I am," because you were documenting. You dove right back into everything that a mom does plus, and
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty incredible what you did. Because reentry, just as anybody might or might not, reentry is really, really tough. But you took it on and started knocking through barriers and really became a powerful voice within this 21 years. Rob, you are on a whole nother world of looking at something that 61 years is not. I mean, how do you eat that
Re-
elephant?
Repeat that question for us. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Rob's looking at 61 years. You walk into Angola. How do you eat that elephant? Mindset wise, what are you thinking, Rob, when you go into that? I'm not looking at, I had this weird experience where I was looking down on this place and I was getting ready to go into the next day. And I was thinking, well, gosh, those guys walking around the track, I'm not going to be there for like a week or a month. I'm going to be there for years. You were looking at decades, Rob. What was going on in your mind?
Man, probably the first thought is probably just whenever you think about going to prison, and especially when you think about going into prisons as notorious as many of those that you just named a second ago. Angola, of course, being one of those, and at the time that I had gone into the prison, it was still considered one of the bloodiest prisons in America. And so with that, my my health, whether or not I'd lose my life or, whether or not I'd be harmed, while I was in prison. Those things were like probably some of the knee-jerk responses that happened for me when I first got there. And then by the time we had, ventured, all the way of getting there, uh it was really a build up because it started early that morning when they picked us up early that morning. Shackled, chained us and put us on a bus and we drove all over the state of Louisiana. We started at the north tip of Louisiana, and by the time the day was over, we ended up all the way down on the swamps of Angola. Angola is a 18,000 acre farm that used to serve as a plantation where they received, well, even before it was a plantation, it was a slave breeding ground. It got its name Angola from Angola, Africa, because they shipped slaves from Angola, Africa. And that was the landing point when they got to the Americas, is that they landed on what we now know as the territory of Angola Prison. Later years, of course, they would move to shut it down as a breeding ground, and then they turned it into a to an all male facility. And as an all male facility, like I said, it would go on later to become one of the most violent places, that you could be in. So, like I said, just kind of the history was going through my head. Uh, Potential threat for violence was in my head. And then finally we went down this 21-mile windy road in order to get to the front gate of Angola. And it's surrounded 3/4 of the way by the Mississippi rivers. Much like Alcatraz, it sits in the middle of the water. And so I got there, it was loud, it was noisy, and in my mind, I was like, "Oh man, these guys are they rocking and rolling in here." It was a lot of cursing and profanity, and it was a lot of B's and O's being yelled out, and I'm like, "Wow, B's and O's? I thought this is all male facility," and it's just those kind of things. I'm like, "Man, those are fighting words. Are they fighting in there?" That's all I could hear, but it was just roaring, roaring, roaring that was going on. I would later learn there was a football game going on in the cell block, and the dudes were actually rooting for their teams. But when you come in and you're facing 60 some odd years, you former military, former college student, former do writer, the last thing that you think is a football game is going on, and that's what all the noise is about. So when
Right.
I got in there, I'm looking around, trying to think for myself, like, well, damn, I don't have a weapon. What do you do in this scenario? So I concocted what I thought would be an answer to that. I had a belt, an extra belt that I had that I was able to come down with because they didn't have me on suicide watch, and I knew I had a couple of padlocks that had been issued to me. So I said, well, I can lock these around my belt. Worst case scenario, I might be able to keep a few people off of me. You know what I'm saying? At least enough till the police came. And so I ended up going into the dormitory. When I got in the dorm, it was quiet. When I got there, I found it odd because it was summertime and everybody was asleep. And because they were asleep, they had sheets over the top of them, and it felt like a morgue to some degree, but I could hear people snoring. And then the other thought was like that image that they give you, like of a slave ship where people are sitting fore to aft, where they sleeping like head to foot. Well, it was just people that were sleeping head to foot because in these prisons they warehouses. And so I finally made it to my bed, in the middle of the night. And as the room started to, my eyes started to adjust to the space, I could just hear men around me kind of breathing and, a few, quiet whispers that were happening. But, all of that would go on for the rest of the night. And ultimately, I woke up the next day and realized that, wow, I made it through that day. And, as it would go on, I would make it through another day and over space and time, just like any environment that you go into, you eventually get to a point that you start kind of learning some things. And I started learning enough that I felt like, I could be okay, in a place like this. And then, just like anywhere else, you get people that approach you with different suggestions from becoming more educated to becoming more criminal. It's a matter of which one of these routes are you going to choose. And so I chose to become more educated. And so I spent a lot of time in the law library. I spent a lot of time at legal writing and research classes. Spent a lot of time in self-help programs and things like that. And so the people that I met were people that were part of those programs. And because they were a part of those programs, that means that my community, even inside of prison, had become at least made up of the people that were positive thinkers and people that wanted to return home and, that genuinely would just do right kind of people, but that had just, made some terrible decisions in life that ultimately landed them in a place like that. And so, that is kind of how my prison journey unfold, in terms of how I came in, like every man probably would, coming into a place like that, is that you have some fear factor that's there, and then you move past the fears because you realize that you got to make it through this. And
Right.
giving up
This
was
is
never an option for me.
no, and I think what you said there is just such a nugget of wisdom too about for anybody who's listening, the prisons out there are having to go in, not losing yourself in prison, but finding ways to make yourself like you're still feeling you're making a difference. And you got in that lane, Rob, and you stayed in that lane. Fox, on your side, you've got these kids. You're coming back out into this world. You're wanting to stay connected uh, to this man that you love. And the one thing that's clear all the way through these 21 years is you guys stayed so strong with the hope factor. And I always, when I was watching your documentary last night, it always brings I think I've seen Shawshank Redemption probably like 15 times. But uh, the interesting thing about that movie is that Red at the end, everything he's saying is, I hope this, I hope this, I hope this. And at the end, I hope I see my friend. And how did you guys keep hope alive?
Because I think for me,
There were
anything
so
else,
many, there were so many ups and downs where you guys could have just said, I'm done with this. But there was nowhere that you guys stayed with it. And you can see the frustration, Fox, on some of these phone calls that you got off of, but you stayed with it.
I think we had to learn to count the small victories. We were never
Yeah.
hopeless. There was
Yeah.
always, even though as dim as the light may have been, the light of hope, but it never went out. And there was always a glimmer of hope that was there, and you just have to grab onto it when you see it, and never let it go, and you ride it all the way to the light. And that was, again, like I said, just our experiences and my letters to giving her what my experiences already are inside of the prison, it at least informed her in ways of, like, I guess, how it is that maybe she could even consider doing her time, once she got there. Again, like I said, just through communications with us back and forth with each other in terms of things that I had learned along the way, that I was able to even suggest to her when she entered the
And then
system.
probably for us too was the very first book I sent Rob when he got to Angola. I went into Barnes and Noble and remember it like it was yesterday. And I'm like, what can I send him? What in this moment when we are so much is stacked against us, our entire existence is questioned right now. And that's when I discovered this book, Man's Search for Meaning, by Viktor Frankl. And I sent it to Rob, and I didn't have a chance to read it. But when I read the cover, I was like, "Well, this should help him. If this man made it through the concentration camp,
Yeah. Yeah.
then certainly he should have something in here to pass on to Rob." And after he read the book, he told me that I needed to get a copy, and I went back and did. And in doing so, the thought of finding the meaning in your suffering, that was what resonated so with us. We had to find the meaning in our suffering, that this was so much greater than us. And then to count all the victories, he talked about how, they would put honey on them and let the honey go back and let the others lick the honey off so that they could eat. Or, when they would find crumbs or just something to eat, it was a victory. Or if you found some shoes that, even in his book, he counted the wins. And that's what Rob and I always strive to do. If I just got somebody to return our phone call, that was a win. If they just accepted my call, that was a win. But we can't begin to see ourselves in our lowest moments as anything other than winners on their way to the greatest victory.
And I think there was a moment there, Fox, that it shipped off $15,000, basically got a letter back. And it seemed like at that moment that it clicked and you took control of, I'm going to understand this. I'm going to power through this. And I don't know when that was in the course of all these years, but
It
boy,
was
that seemed like a
March
big
5th.
moment.
As a matter of fact, it was March 5th of 2013 that letter was dated for. But I, like many people, I kept hoping that I could just pay the right lawyer and the right lawyer
Yeah.
would handle this. We kept
Right.
thinking if we just get the right lawyer on our matter. But it wasn't until Rob started learning law and then I started understanding the law he was learning that we began to even get back into court. And that was probably 15 years into our sentence by that time. But once he started learning law and I started understanding it, then we could really activate and move toward what we needed to do in order to obtain freedom for ourselves. I think that we all make some kind of mistakes. So I don't think that it is righteous of us, any of us, to give up on an opportunity to be free.
Right. And I think, what a great teamwork of you guys,
Yeah.
of Rob becoming basically an in-house attorney in Angola, and then you feeding off of that and using it on the outside. When was it that the both of you thought, oh man, this is close, this is real, this could really happen? Like when did, because you had so many different times that it happened, when did it finally feel like, wait a minute, because I know there's a phone call that happens. And Rob, you were talking about, and boy, it like really brings you like down to the soul to understand. You say you're talking about the pecan trees that were planted 20 years ago, and now there's a whole grove of them. But in that phone call, I know that you all still had to have thought, another shoe could drop and this won't happen. But was that the time that you guys on that phone call that you thought, okay, this is the governors might really, this might all the dots connect?
Those were other arguments that we were arguing, and I'd have to tell you, we always thought that
Right.
that was the heartbreak. It was like always like, this is it.
We
This is
always thought it
pack
was
your
it.
bags. I got a drawer for you. I'm putting your clothes in a drawer. I'm
Plate
setting
for
it.
you at Thanksgiving.
The whole nine. We always thought this was it, but when it finally was April 2017 when our youngest son went to hear Frank Luntz, the Republican pollster, speak at
Yeah.
Loyola. And he stood up
Yeah.
and asked Frank a question. And Frank says to him, "Hey, kid, don't leave. I'm going to change your life." He met Frank Luntz a couple of days later for coffee, invited me to join them. And he says, your son is the most impressive person I've met in the past 25 years. And if you know anything about Frank Luntz, that's quite a compliment.
That's quite a
And he
compliment.
said, what can I do for your family? And to which Freedom's mother, who knew he had this meeting coming up, had already prepared him that, when you sit with this man of importance, you need to think about what it is that you want to ask his assistance with. And so to which Frank says, how can I help you? And Freedom was prepared to answer. And his answer was, my father needs a pardon. And I'm trying to get him home, not for me, but for my baby brother, who deserves an opportunity to grow up with our dad. And he says, I never asked these people for anything, but I have a meeting scheduled with your governor, and I will ask him about your family. I can't make you any promises, but I will raise your family to the governor. And 2 months later, he did call me on January the 9th from the convening of governors in Rhode Island, and said that he had just met with our governor for an hour, and our governor had committed to signing my husband's pardon as long as he got past his pardon board. And so that was 2017. We didn't even have a hearing date till the next year, but that is when we knew that the governor had committed to sign for us. And so he was released the following year in September.
It's just incredible. And you've got to be so proud of those sons of yours. I mean, because that's another thing about, there's always such a bad narrative that everybody loses the family and the family breaks up. And there is a lot of that. But you guys put in so much extra work to make sure that those kids were a part of and they walk with pride. I mean, and they should be proud because they're accomplished and they were part of this movement that you two did together. And finally the time when Rob, you get out and there's that joyous, reunion, man, that had to feel good.
Yeah, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. It was, like Fox said, just that moment when you know that it was over, or at least
Yeah.
you knew that that part of it was
That
over.
part was over.
And
Yeah.
even, as early on as we knew that we had the governor's support for my clemency, it didn't stop me from feeling like I was walking inside of the prison. Because if you've ever been to prison, something as simple as having too many pair of shoes under your bed, leaving a wet towel out, all those things are, rule infractions and can be cause for a write-up. And a write-up could very well upset my recommendation that had just been made, and so for me it wasn't really over until I walked out the gate. And when I finally walked out the gate, shit, I couldn't even shout very much. I was like, damn, they might see me leaving. They might think that this is a mistake or something.
Wait, we made a mistake.
He didn't know what to do when he walked out the gate. He's just like, are you sure? Are you sure?
They are letting me go.
You could definitely hear Fox.
Right. But for me, like I said, my excitement didn't happen until we had gotten off that 21-mile windy road and was back up onto the main road. And I was like, wow. And as as we're driving past, if you look close in the picture, you would be able to see that there were buses going toward Angola, and then there was our limo that was driving away from Angola. And so just in that moment, I was thinking like how many of those guys were new guys that were just coming into the prison for the very first time, as I had been at one point, in just the reverse. And so yeah, it was a really
Well,
one of those really worthwhile moments.
It just you feel it. It's like when you see the hockey team win the gold, you feel when you walk out and you grab each other, and it's just that moment of elation. So you guys get back together after all this time, and the kids and you see in the documentary that everything, and they burn that picture of you that's been hanging, that now he's really here in our home. Let's talk about what you're doing now.
We do a work with other justice-involved families called Participatory Defense Movement NOLA. It's pdmnola.org is our site. It's an initiative of our ministry where we teach families legal awareness as you join together with your white-collar crimes group and talk about matters. We do the same thing with families every Thursday night in New Orleans. We call it Participatory Defense, where we teach families how to work on their own defense, how to get support from the community, how to leverage community relationships before the court actors, so that the courts know that you are someone of value to the community and not just another number that they could discard. And so we count our success by how much time we save families from serving in prison versus how much time they've been sanctioned to serve. And our organization, which is one hub of 40 hubs across this country doing this work, we have saved 4,000 years of time in prison. And nationally, collectively, we have saved over 40,000 years of people serving time behind bars. So from
That's
bringing home
huge,
the
Fox.
longest serving woman in the state of Louisiana, Mama Glow. We started a campaign for her 6 months after Rob got out. We bought her home. Our fall partner, who was not able to get out through Clemency, we were able to get a change of policy in the state of Louisiana that not only gave an opportunity for parole for our fall partner, our nephew, but it gave over 3,000 other families who thought they were going to die in prison because they had 30 years or more of a sentence, an opportunity to get parole at 20 years after 20 years behind bars and reaching the age of 45. So that was legislation that was initiated by Rob and I and completed once he got home through getting the change of policy done through the state legislature in 2021. And so that's what we do. We understand,
That's
Mr.
powerful,
Cassidy, that
guys.
to be free is to free others. And that is what we
Yes.
live by. And that's what we work every day to do.
I love it. I'm only got one more question. Okay. Fox, I've only got one more. So, Rob, what do you think's your biggest takeaway through all of it? Because you've lived a journey.
Probably the biggest takeaway is the one that Fox just made mention, and that is that the very function of freedom is rooted in freeing someone else. And so when I left prison, I left prison with survivor's guilt. Like many people do when they leave war. They go back home and they leave friends and others in war-ridden territories, and they get back home and they realize that, man, Sergeant so and so or corporate so and so should have had the same opportunity, but instead they're still ducking bombs. Well, much of the same way, when I left out of prison, I knew that there were some other guys that I knew that were equally, if not greater, deserving than I was, in that moment. The one thing that you're hopeful for in the moment is that they would be able to see the same. And so I knew that if any of that was going to really happen, it wasn't going to come from my survivor's guilt that it was going to have to happen, but a level of ambition was going to have to kick in. And as Fox may mention earlier on the call, we just began to use our voice, our platform, as a mouthpiece for for people who don't have
Yeah.
a voice.
Well, you guys are creating real change. Anything to add to that, Fox, with your takeaway?
Well, that is it for us. But for you, I just say thank you. Thank you for being willing to use your story for the betterment of others. It
Right.
takes a lot of sacrifice to share, to expose yourself in such a way. And so for you to be willing and to have the courage that it takes to speak freely about your transgressions in hopes of empowering others, I just our hat goes off to you. Thank you so much. And thank you for allowing us to share with your community.
Yeah, yes, indeed.
And I want to give it another shout out to the documentary. It's an Oscar nominated documentary that you can find on Amazon called Time, and you can find their book Time: The Untold Story of the Love That Held Us Together When Incarceration Kept Us Apart. And just a little bit of more gratitude here. I want to give a shout out to Homestead Financial. Lets me use this studio with all the fancy lights and cameras. If you got home mortgage needs out there, Greg Aftiev is your guy. Go check out my book too if you got time. It's Nightmare Success, Loyalty, Betrayal, Life Behind Bars, and Finally Breaking Free. Leave me a review on Apple if you got time. Go to BrentCassity.com. I spell it wrong. I spell my name with a T-Y, not a D-Y. As I used to say to my people when I was writing my emails back and forth from Leavenworth, stay strong. I'll do the same. Fox and Rob, I'm just so glad you're doing what you're doing. I'm so glad you have each other and doing it together. It's an inspiration of how you guys are making an impact, and just keep going. Keep going.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I got to add a shout out to that as well. I got to shout out Brian Newton for even connecting
How could
us.
we have gone through the whole thing?
I
We
didn't
want to shout
forget.
out to Brian Newton. He put us all together. Brian Newton,
Yes.
big
That's
shout
right.
out.
Yes. Thank you so much for
All
what
right.
you're doing, and we look to talk with you real soon.
Yeah. Take
All
care, Brett.
right, folks. Nightmare Success in and out.